well, wherever you are. And do let us know where you are as well in the chat box. Which country, which city are you in?
Mr. Gershen's joined us.
Okay. Where are you? Where are you, Dale? You're in Bangkok, right?
Yeah, I'm in Bangkok. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you see who's first in the chat? Steve Gershen's there.
Is he? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So we've got Japan, Bangkok, Singapore. Fantastic.
Hua Hin. Oh, I wish I was there with you. Who's that? Alan's in Hua Hin. Very nice.
Oh, yeah.
Shanghai.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Azerbaijan. Wow, amazing.
That's funny. Yeah.
That's very
Manila, Philippines, lovely.
Good. And let us know what you're drinking as well. What are you drinking today, Dale?
I've got a cup of tea. It's not a Yorkshire tea. That's my favorite, but that kind of it's a bit too expensive to buy in Bangkok. So I've got it's actually a Waitrose tea.
A Waitrose tea. Okay.
I'm very Chinese. What have you got in there?
I'm very Chinese today. I've gone green tea.
Because you're in Shanghai, right?
Exactly. So
nice.
Trying to get off coffee and more of the green tea. But anyway, good. Well, we've got a very international bunch, a global bunch today, which is perfect for our topic, our first topic that we're going to be looking at. And we're going to be looking at something called global skills over the next around 20 minutes, very sort of short and sweet. So we'll have a look, we'll discuss a very organic discussion. Let's see where the discussion takes us, Dale. And we'll have a look at maybe sort of defining global skills, their importance, have a chat about how we might integrate them into our ELTea classrooms. Is there a place in the ELTea classroom for global skills? And we'll also address assessment. Can things like global skills be assessed in and outside of the classroom? We encourage you guys out there, if you have any questions as well, do feel free to post in the chat box. So, without further ado,
thoughts and answers. Yeah, sorry, John.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, without further ado, let's jump in. And so, I think the first question, Dale, that I want to ask you to kick things off, your current role. You're working in ELTea. You're an academic consultant, teacher trainer. What are some of the core skills that you need for your job today?
So I would think in my current role, communication is probably the key skill. Obviously, it's the skill that I probably use the most. You know, when I do teacher training, I have to communicate, I have to get a message across to teachers. So that would be the first most important one. And I'm going to think of global skills a little bit within the 4 C's. So maybe people are aware of the 4 C's, but communication. Then I would imagine I use collaboration quite a bit. In fact, just last week, sorry, we did a session together, didn't we? We collaborated on a training session. That meant we had to first of all plan it and discuss it, and then deliver the session. So it's a really good example of collaboration. Creativity for sure. COVID has really made us become more creative. I think we've taken face-to-face classrooms, moved them online, and to be able to do that effectively, it's required, certainly from me, a lot of creativity and doing things differently, particularly now as we're seeing people again for the third time online. And then I would say a little bit critical thinking probably is the skill that I use least, but certainly when we are researching things, you do need to sort out the fact from the fiction, and particularly when you're looking at research online or articles online. So I'd say those are the core 4 C's that I use. Well, what about yourself?
No, I would agree. But actually, I would say there would be a lot of critical thinking. I'm thinking more connecting to, for example, like the Bloom's taxonomy, for example. So when we are designing a presentation, maybe or a talk like this, we are kind of developing knowledge or understanding it, and then we kind of evaluate what we're learning and sort of synthesize it and bring it all together, and then we kind of create these sessions. So I think in that sense we probably do. So actually connecting then to taking what you've said there and connecting to transitioning to the next part, you mentioned the 4 C's, which I'm sure most people know about for your job: communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking. So when we're talking about global skills and these 21st century skills, are they the same thing? A little bit different?
Well, I think within those 4 C's, there's probably soft skills, other soft skills that are added to it to make it more global. So it could be, the umbrella term could be the 4 C's, and then within those 4 C's, there are other sub skills from that. Or the umbrella term could be global skills, and the 4 C's are within that, and then added on are other soft skills such as intercultural competence, digital literacy, and so forth. Global citizenship. I can never say that word, citizenship, but it's you know what I mean, right? So
Okay.
these are key areas as well, and certainly I think intercultural competence. You and me both have, and our colleagues who work with us, obviously use that very, very extensively.
Okay. Yeah, I think for example, I mean, these kind of skills are nothing new, are they? It's something that's been with us for a while. But I think what you said there's a few kind of additional kind of add-ons, aren't there, now to kind of 21st century skills, as you mentioned, like intercultural competence, for example, digital literacies, for example, and the other one as well that we haven't mentioned is something which is very, very important, I guess, and relevant to all the lockdown and the current situations around Asia, would be emotional self-regulation and well-being
Yes,
on that
yeah.
side as well.
So with that, are you also talking about like whole child development as well? Would that fit in with that emotion? Yeah.
Could be, and we would kind of interlap maybe with things like social emotional learning, for example,
Okay.
things like
Right.
that
Right. Right.
in the classroom that we could teach. I think now, which is quite trendy, isn't it, is that mindfulness as well, helping students and
Mm-hmm.
teachers be kind of mindful of their practices
Yeah.
and their life and things like that too.
And well-being, right? That's a sort of a key word that's coming up that involves that mindfulness as well, doesn't it? And certainly
Yeah.
that's something when I was doing my research that came into global skills. I think it's in one of the frameworks that we can see.
Exactly. And maybe just important to note that where we've got these kind of areas as well, and there's a few kind of frameworks for global skills out there which are being used by different governments, different countries around the world. So if you're interested to find out more, look at things like the UNESCO 4 pillars of education. That's a good kind of area.
Do you remember what those 4 pillars are, John? Just not to put you on the spot.
Off the top of my head, no, but I can't remember the headings.
Learning to
Work,
learning to
learning
know,
to live, learning to know,
learning to do,
learning to
learning
do.
to live, and learning to be. So those
Okay.
4, yeah. So I
Perfect.
guess 2 would be work, yeah.
Yeah. And there are other kind of frameworks as well. We've got a kind of the framework for 21st century skills learning as well. And sometimes they might put those areas in a slightly different wording, but they usually come under these kind of 5 key areas that we've mentioned, right? So communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, intercultural, emotional self-regulation, well-being, and then number 5, digital literacies. And
Right.
all those kind of frameworks tend to kind of summarize them, sometimes with their own wording, but I guess ours is a kind of a summary there. Actually, also
Have you
important to
seen
know.
these?
Go on.
God, so just by talking about frameworks, the PISA one, there's a really good one from PISA, which is the global competency framework they have. So
Yeah.
they have, again, seems to be in groups of 4, but they have skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes. I kind of like that. It's quite simplistic, but it's easy to fit things into that, I think.
Okay. And as mentioned, I mean, some governments, some ministries of education will be including these, in their curriculums across, probably transferable across all subjects. So that will be coming kind of we say like a top-down approach to these kind of global skills. There's also kind of bottom-up approaches, which starts with us, right, as teachers,
Yeah.
and getting knowledge about this, and integrating ourselves. So I think kind of a good approach is when they both kind of
When they join in the middle.
Yeah, meet together. I guess. So why are these kind of important? And I've got one eye here on a top 10 skills list from the World Economic Forum about the top 10 skills needed for 2025. You know the one I mean, from the World Economic Forum.
They changed it, didn't they? Did they change it last year? Or I can't remember, but it definitely changed due to the COVID-19 situation. They've adapted it. So even if you are aware of it, then Google it, and you'll be able to find out more of how it's. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Daisy. She's popped it in the chat box.
Brilliant. So what pops up there? I'm just thinking what pops up, and I think these are kind of the top 10 skills that employers are looking for in employees by 2025. And I guess we have a look at these, and then we can see are we helping our students do this, and if so, great. If not, what can we be doing to kind of help them, I guess?
Yeah. I think first of all, awareness, isn't it? It's making our students aware that they need this as well. And I don't think we need to do that maybe in primary. I think they probably don't have the cognitive ability to think about what they're going to do in the future and what they need to do. But certainly in secondary, when kids are actually starting to think about a life after school, then they need to know, they need this information. And it's up to us to give it to them, and then develop activities and things to do in the classroom and outside the classroom that help with that.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at that list now of top 10 skills that employers look for. And we've got a lot of thinking ones, like analytical thinking, problem solving, critical thinking, are all there in the top 5. What else have we got there? We've got creativity.
So let me ask you a question, John. So with this list, if you were recruiting a teacher, well, what do you think would say be the top 3 that you'd be looking for within this list?
In modern day classrooms, I think some creativity. I think there. We've also got technology use, right? I think these days most course books or most schools, institutions have their own software or learning management system, for example, or presentation software. So I think teachers need to be a little bit tech savvy as well, especially if they're online teaching and need to use, I don't know, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Forms, all these kind of things to make their online classes engaging. Then that's super important. But I like this one. I like the resilience. Stress tolerance and flexibility. Things will change, situations will change. You're out of lockdown, you're back in lockdown. The flexibility, ability to manage or be resilient. I want that. I think kind of other technical skills can be developed on the job, but I think these ones are essential. So
and then I guess the question. Yeah, I completely agree with what you just said, particularly the resilience one and the flexibility. I think that is a real key skill that people need to have, and things like this are not going to go away. People are going to need to change, and that list might even be changed by the time we get to 2025, for example. But I guess the challenge is, if you think of resilience and flexibility as being a key global skill, how do you actually help a student to develop that? Because it kind of comes from trouble, doesn't it? Nobody wanted COVID-19 to happen, right? But we all had to become flexible and resilient and find ways around it. But we didn't want to do that. That was just something we had to do. So obviously we don't want to give our students stress in order to develop that muscle of being flexible. So it's a tough question.
Yeah, I think so. I like the phrase to be proactive and not reactive. So you don't kind of
Mm,
wait for a bad situation and then react to it, or wait for a problem to happen and then react to it. Kind of prepare yourself and be kind of proactive first. And I guess that leads on quite nicely to, is ELT classroom, a good place to be developing these kind of skills proactively,
mm.
I guess. And as English language teachers, is it our job to be developing these skills as well as language, or is that a massive burden? I mean, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, I think it is our job to do that. I think it's every teacher's job to do that. It's just part of the it's part of the job description. I don't necessarily see my students as coming to the class just to learn English. There's lots of other things going on. They are building those, particularly with younger learners. They are building those skills of working together, collaboration, taking in turns, learning values, that kind of thing. And obviously, these skills are then transferable, hopefully, to other classrooms and then outside the classroom. So, in the same way, yeah, I see them as it's just being part and parcel of what you do as a teacher. It's kind of integrated into what we do.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, I'm thinking an integrative approach, like when we're integrating these into the classroom, is better, not kind of standalone kind of skills. They're kind of integrated into everything that we do. I think we can make them visible. I think we
Yeah,
can make them visible, and like you said, we can explain to students why they're important, how they're going to help the students in the future, make them visible, reflect on those skills as they're developing them, maybe in the classroom. But it's fun. It's funny because I'm thinking back to when I first started teaching, and maybe our teachers here as well can think about when they first started teaching. I'm thinking of Steve there as well. We've got Steve Gershon here as well. Think about when Steve started teaching many years ago, maybe in China. Steve started teaching in China, actually. How teaching has changed. I mean, when you first started teaching, Dale, there in Thailand, your role as an English language teacher compared to maybe what it is now, do you think it's changed then in this kind of 15 or 20 years? I don't want to give away your age, Del.
no, it's okay. We are welcome to do that. I think people could probably guess. Yeah, it definitely has changed, but I think it's changed from both. Well, from a number of different sides. I think the schools have tried to change. I think me as a person has changed. Certainly, I'm hopefully a better teacher, understanding more than just the idea of teaching, getting some English across to some students. I think the demands of students and others, the let's call them the customers have changed as well. So when I think about primary students, the parents are generally the customers, and they've become a lot more savvy, a lot more interested in what goes on in and outside the classroom. So yeah, I mean, it's changed immensely.
Mm,
Some for the better, some for the worse, but
yeah,
I think mainly for the better.
yeah, okay.
What about yourself? I mean, I'd be interested as well to think about maybe the change in how global skills were taught when you were at school, and then when you became a teacher, and what they're like now. So, do
Yeah,
you want to talk about that
yeah.
process?
I think kind of visibly, it's hard to think back and say that we were visibly taught global skills, but I think they must have been kind of integrated there inside our kind of syllabus and curriculums at the time. So things like kind of project work on the communication, the collaboration side. But I don't remember kind of visibly being told, okay, critical thinking is something that's
Yeah,
important. You're going to need it in the future. It just wasn't maybe so relevant or so visible then. I wish we had been, to be honest. But I'm thinking I learned a lot of these skills from peers, but probably maybe more on in the sports arena, playing cricket or rugby,
exactly.
or team sports or
Yeah,
something like that,
yeah,
as opposed to in the classroom. But it,
yeah.
but what teachers do these days is incredible compared to how we started out and the kind of skills they're developing, what's included in the curriculums as well. I think education has completely changed, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so we've got a great question there as well about talking about kind of integrating in some of these areas. Could be kind of cultural and cultural values, and is it easy to integrate these into some cultures as opposed to others? I guess a lot will depend on the top-down approaches from the government and what they want, and the ministries and what they want to include and promote inside the curriculum and syllabi. I guess will dictate a lot, won't it? And what kind of values or citizenship that they want their kind of citizens to have. I guess it will change quite a bit, won't it, across cultures?
I think that cultural thing as well is kind of like sometimes you're going to have a clash. I'm just thinking about it's just coming into my head now where, for example, in Thailand, the students are all studying online at the moment, and some schools are making the students wear their uniforms while they study. Now, this sort of this is obviously a cultural thing, and also they have some schools have to have their cameras on and standing up and respecting the national anthem at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? So again, another cultural thing. Whereas if you were to introduce critical thinking, you might introduce students actually questioning this cultural need to do so. So it's kind of like you've got these cultures clashing with the global skills that they're learning. So it's an interesting question, Steve. Yeah,
that's a tricky one. And I guess from an international publisher's perspective as well, versus like a local ministry of education prerogatives. Again, there could be, some balance to get there as well. And I think from an international publisher's point of view, it's really important for us to really understand local values and things like that, and communicate that with the global publishing team, so that we're sensitive to that as well, right?
I think one of the things we know as teachers, though, is we know that course books that generally are published in a global scale, so that you do have to do not a lot, but a certain amount of adaptation and leave things out that might not be relevant, and that might be language, and it also might be cultural ideas as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right then. So we've had a look about what they are, the importance, some great conversations and questions coming in then as well, and reflecting back about how maybe education has sort of changed a bit, and maybe we can find some place within inside ELTea for integrating these kind of skills. Even better if you've got a course book, right, that integrates these skills for you, saves you a lot of time. So just to finish off then, tricky one about assessing global skills. So if it's something that we want to develop, is it something that can be assessed? So I mean, something like critical thinking that's coming up here, is that something that can be visibly kind of assessed, like the 4 skills, for example? What do we think?
I think yes. I think there are ways of assessing it. I think if we look at formative assessment in this respect, though, rather than a summative assessment of critical thinking, I don't think you could do that. But certainly, formative assessment of these skills could be achieved. I also think in order for teachers to implement, or to be required to implement, there needs to be some kind of measurement system for them to use. And by having that measurement system, they're more likely to use it, rather than to say it's just something that we can take or leave. But I do think they can be. Now, I know that you've written a blog actually on assessing critical thinking, so you're probably better able to talk about this. So how do we do it?
So I was just reading a question as well about reflective practice is not listed in the top 10 skills. But actually, this is a crossover to what we're going to talk about now, maybe. And in terms of assessing something like critical thinking, well, the way I tend to think of it, and obviously we've got aspects or kind of tools like the CEFR these days, a common European framework, which is being integrated in some systems around Asia. I've done a lot of work in Japan there as well, actually, with some local prefectures there who are integrating a CEFR into their learning and teaching. And it's a matter of setting maybe kind of visible, clear for example, can-do statements, for example. Critical thinking can actually be broken down, can't it, into kind of sub skills of critical thinking as well. You know, the ability to evaluate or identify arguments, to summarize ideas, to synthesize ideas. You can kind of break it down into sub skills, and then create kind of can-do statements around these sub skills, for example, which can be made visible to students maybe at the start of a class. They work on those sub skills throughout the class, and then you can reflect back on those kind of skills at the end of the class or at end of the unit. They can self-reflect, for example, self-review themselves in this kind of ongoing way. I guess that ties into something called assessment for learning as well. Like kind of a cycle, like an ongoing cycle, which this might fall under, mightn't it, I think. And something like critical thinking and other global skills, cooperation, communication, and again, you can break this down into sub skills, I think, and work on them. Yeah.
You can have rubrics that you can follow, and say even if you're going online and doing it, so you're putting students into breakout rooms and assessing, you know, how they're working together, whether they're participating. And I don't think that necessarily means to be the person who's speaking the most, because often collaboration and communication is about listening as well as speaking as well. So there's lots of different nuances and skills that you can look at and assess.
But would you make that visible to students? So, for example, if they were cooperating online, working in breakout rooms, would you make that visible that you were going to, you know, assess them and observe them for that?
Definitely, yeah. I think I would, yeah. Particularly particularly with, say, teenage learners who can understand what we're doing when we're talking about assessment, and they may understand formative assessment more so than summative. So yeah, I would do. I also think if we feel that this is important, which we know it is, we can also, if you're weak, say at the actual language, but you're very strong at communicating and collaborating, then this is a way of recognizing the whole child rather than just their abilities to form a sentence correctly in English. So this is another way that students can excel.
Okay. Oh, Steve is on fire today. We've got another question. Wow. Oh, tough one. Yeah. Formal assess. Formally assessing critical thinking, quite tricky. I'm thinking more an informative way. Like we said, maybe breaking critical thinking down into sub skills, identifying the strengths and weaknesses of students in those particular sub skills, and then kind of working throughout a course to develop, you know, those weaknesses, for example, in a more sort of informative way. What do you think, Dale?
It's interesting that last question, how to separate thinking skills from language skills. So yeah, very, very much so. I think obviously thinking skills, I think the 4 C's, all the skills we've talked about today are very much transferable in another language. They should be using those skills effectively in their first language as well. So communication, for example, is not just about being able to speak English. It's about using your body language and all that kind of things that we use to communicate. So it's a very good question. I think we should have Stephen on the next ELT time to answer these questions for us.
I reckon we're going to bring Steve in at some point. I reckon he needs to come on to one of these ELT times, I think.
We should tell everybody who Stephen is, by the way.
Actually, yes. So maybe he wants to stay incognito. I don't know.
Okay. Keep it incognito.
Do I get a free? Steve, you get one of these. You get one of these Macmillan Education Cups for all these great questions. We'll get Sato-san in Japan to send you one over, maybe. Okay. Well, that was fast and furious. That was a very fast 28 minutes. We've covered a lot of ground. Did our best to kind of define, show the importance, and have a look at things like integrating them and assessing them. We'll send out a follow-up email with a few other links as well if you're interested to find out more. So yeah, well, thanks for joining us. I mean, that was our first session. It was brilliant to have you all here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And stay tuned for the next episode. And we'll be looking at other key areas, global skills. We'll have a look at assessment for the future, digital teaching skills, for example, inclusivity as well, which will include things like personalization, differentiation.
Yeah.
Let us know topics as well, and we're very happy to talk about anything over a cup of tea. So thanks very much. He's been Del.
He's been John.
Thanks for stopping by, Asia.
Stay classy, Asia.
See you next time.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.